Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Into the Unknown podcast. And if you've been listening to the past couple of weeks, maybe you've been wondering, what is this about? This sounds pretty experimental. Uh, this is what this is about. It's about doing experiments together, being in a kind of a different space of extraordinary conversation around the topics of initiation, culture, feelings work, nature connection, exploring, altered states of consciousness, and also for me, connecting back to what are the indigenous memories in my body that have been locked away since colonization and forms of oppressive education have begun to really take over the world. And so this is our intention, is to be on this path together of going into the unknown and exploring what else could be together. And the way we've been doing it is at the beginning of each podcast, one of us leads a short centering exercise. So if you want to do that with us, feel free to just settle back into your body, into your seat. And today I'm not wearing headphones because I want my ears to be more open to the outside world. So if that's an option for you, and even if you can go outside or be like near an open window, inviting you to do that. Inviting you to close your eyes. As my partner Paul Hanick says, close your eyes and open everything else. Coming in touch with your breath. Inviting that we go on a journey through the senses. So beginning with the sense of touch. Noticing what are the sensations throughout your skin, of your clothing on your body, perhaps a light breeze across your skin. I can feel the weight of my glasses on my nose when I pay attention to it. Your sense of hearing. What do you notice when you tune into your hearing? What is the closest sound you can hear to yourself? What is the furthest distant away sound that you can hear from yourself? Becoming aware of everything in between, can you notice all the sounds at once in all directions around you? Noticing the sense of taste. and the sense of smell. How do these two relate to one another and connect? And noticing with your closed eyelids the subtle light filtering through them. And as you prepare to open your eyes, become aware of what are the the feeling sensations in you. What are the subtle feelings? Do you have subtle fear, subtle sadness, subtle anger, subtle joy? And inviting that you open your eyes. Staying connected to the inner world of your feelings as you connect outward visually. If there's a, if you can happen to be in a place where you can see nature, inviting that you notice if your eyes are drawn to a particular plant, allowing your eyes to softly gaze upon a plant. Your eyes are jumping around from one point of focus to another, seeing if you can allow your eyes to gently rest on one plant. See if you can be in an experience of beholding the plant. Taking in the experience of this whole life form, not as a concept, but as a living being. And as you do this, notice if you can that you have this point focus where you can see one particular leaf. And then you have your peripheral focus, which can see everything from that point outwards, the outer limit of your field. See if as you're noticing this one plant, you can behold the whole of the forest or of the habitat that you're in, the place that you're in, that you're living your life right now. See if you can include yourself in that. Notice as you're noticing this whole space of habitation that you're in, your place within it. Becoming aware as you do so of the place in you that is your center. What does it mean to be centered to you? And inviting that you keep this question alive as we proceed into this conversation.
Cool. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Noticing a deep sense of calm and openness, connectedness, breathing slower and My body feels heavier.
Thank you. Would you be willing to share what your feelings are doing right now?
Yeah, well, I noticed there's like a little bit of excitement, maybe for that invitation to like go inward and be in that inward space outwardly with you. Um, Earlier you had mentioned something about maybe micro feelings at some point during that, or something about like small feelings.
Mm.
So I noticed there's a really eclectic mix going on of emotions, particularly around my heart space. There's some anxiety and there's some fear and pride and like confidence, boldness, and like curiosity, mystery. I've had a pretty intense week, and I get the sense these are like trails of different stories that have been weaving together. They're like just different threads of these different stories that have been weaving together in my life all week. So it's just interesting, like getting this image of like a braided, like a braid of all my experiences coming and meeting here in my heart and feeling it through my emotions. And that's where I'm meeting you right now, is the end of this braiding, this ongoing braiding of life, that is culminating in this particular conversation at this moment.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. I'm feeling sadness right now, really, I think tuning into that sense of habitat and being a part of this particular habitat, this particular place. And I'm actually moving in not too long, in like another month or so, to Duncan on Vancouver Island. So, and there's the sadness of leaving. Like there's the sadness of like there's a particular tree that I looked at in that exercise, and it's like, oh, I'll miss this particular tree, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's these two trees that my partner and I always look at on the horizon from our window, and they're just real character trees. They're just like, it's like they started growing up like all the others, and at the end they were like, well, I'm gonna do this. It's like one is like kind of does that at the top, the other one has like wings at the top. It's like not just a point, it's like I'm gonna do this instead. And just like there's I noticed the stories that I have about the place that I live, mm, stories that I create with others, such a point of connection. The experiences I have with others, and I've lived here for a year. It's like, yeah, I just have sadness to be leaving it in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Hmm.
Um,
I have slight fear because a part of me just wants to be in this space of not talking, and
Mm.
this is also something that people will be listening to. So I feel some fear of like
Yeah, I was having the same process. It's like this silence is really nourishing. Um, the quiet is really nourishing, and there's some awkwardness of silence in this context, um, which itself is interesting. Um, it's like a little bit see this like colonial pattern of needing to fill all space with action or activity or thought or process, um, which is it's like I notice like I'm feeding into right now as I say these words. I'm filling the space with my constructed words here. Um, but my feeling sense was more connected in that place of silence. And I guess naming that and acknowledging that we're in the context of this podcast, it's like it's this curiosity of merges of like how to bring this silence, this peace, this like non-doing, this being state into conversation and into connection with doing and action,
Mhm.
and being directive. And anyway, my invitation to you, Scott, and to myself would be like, how do we be in that way together, where we engage in this context, which we've committed to of having a conversation together, but also commit to being in silence and stillness, at least in some part of our being.
Yeah. Yeah, and just for those listening, I'll say that Michael and I decided to start recording our conversations because we found them to be really nourishing and extraordinary. And so at this point, episode 3 in, I'm not really clear if anybody's listened to any of the episodes. So, so you could be among the first patrons or can, first ones to join our circle and to have influence and to send us a question or a comment and say, hey, I really love the silence. Yeah, more silence, please. And to some extent, for now, Michael, like I'm just down for just being how we're going to be because well, in my culture, there are 5 different kinds of bodies. Like we have the physical body, and then the intellectual body, and the emotional body, and the energetic body, and then something we call the archetypal body. And all of them have needs. They all have foods, and they all have pains, and they all have ecstasies. And I notice as I listen to other podcasts, there's a lot of intellectual feeding,
Mm.
and yeah, it's mainly intellectual body focus, not exclusively. But what I notice is that the silence feeds a different part of my body. Like it feeds my being, it feeds my energetic body, and if I'm able to be present with that space, then my feelings can come out. So really noticing, inviting you listener to notice as you're listening, if there is space, like, and there is discomfort, like what is that about for you? And I think, I mean, my sense is that this is really, really on topic for initiation work, for creating like silence and being in contact, being in a kind of intimate contact with others, being willing to listen and to quiet the mind as I'm listening to another person, not just to their words, but to their heart, to what their energetic body is saying as I'm listening to them, is a vital community skill.
Mhm.
So I want that to continue here.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm noticing it's sort of apt. We call this podcast "Into the Unknown," and I don't know, sort of a big an archetype for that is like space or like underwater, or like these dark places that are hard to explore with the capacities that we have already. Um, but all those places are very silent, dark, like hard to orient. Um,
Hmm.
so the silence makes a lot of sense. Um, when we're in the unknown. I also noticed I got excited when I said the word orient there. We had mentioned, we were talking about maps a bit earlier. And yeah, maybe silence is actually one of the starting places to engage with maps, of like this just deep listening of like, how do I orient in this space that doesn't have many places or any places or signs to orient around? Um, and what do we do when we're creating something that's never existed before?
Well, would you be willing to start out with even going back to like maps? You know, even maps is kind of a jargonish term when used, I think, in the way that we're talking about it, like cultural maps, or like could you build the context for that a little bit before we go there?
Yeah. Let me back that up. Like, I think there's many different domains that a map could exist in. So like all those 5 bodies you just talked about, there could be maps to explore each of those domains. But the purpose of a map is to um, give symbolic representation of the nature or structure of an area to help one find their place in that place. And they can use it as a tool to explore, go new places in a way that's safe, in a way that they can accomplish their goals, um, in a way that they understand the hazards. Um,
Hmm.
anyway, that's what's emerging right now. I think if
And
you ask me any other time,
yeah,
I'd say something very different.
well, and I'll add that maps describe different aspects of reality.
Mm,
So, and they describe reality with a certain degree of accuracy, and they're either useful or not useful. So if it's like, if I have a map of a physical landscape, then I could have a map that shows me where are all the fruit bearing bushes in this particular area. Well, it'll be within a degree of accuracy. I'm sure, I'll miss a few, or I can only be so detailed, but it'll maybe tell me generally where they are. And it's useful. It's useful because it shows me where I can go and eat food. Um, but maps don't have to be useful. They can describe anything, and they can be inaccurate. And that's a physical map. But then it's possible to have maps of like maps describing ways in which culture works, to describe with a certain degree of accuracy how to orient towards culture, how to orient towards living in a human body that has emotions and sensations mm, and and like I was describing that, there's five in my culture, there's 5 bodies. Well, there's so many different cultures that have different maps about that. Like, oh, there's no that Western modern culture might say there's one body, or they might split it into different systems within the physical body, but it won't be acknowledged there's an emotional body or there's subtler bodies. And then go to yoga, and maybe some schools will say, like, no, there's 144 bodies or something like that. But I think what's important is that whatever the map is that it's based in reality, it's based in experience, and that it's something that can be useful, practical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is interesting in the context of like, something is only useful or practical sort of if you know what you want. And then it also needs to be specific. So if like, I know I want to go hiking, I know I need a topographic map, maybe 1 to 40,000 or 1 to 25,000. But if I have a map of some place in Himachal Pradesh and I'm living here in Nelson, BC, it's not going to be useful for me at all. And so I guess there's this piece of like what makes a map useful, is a big part of like knowing what we're doing or where we're going, or like what our desires are, or what our definition of success is, or at least the curiosity to go somewhere and engage with the map, even if we don't know what we want.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, I would propose that I don't have to necessarily know what I want yet. Like, sometimes maps can reveal to me something I was totally unconscious of. Oh, this map is describing a layer of reality that I wasn't aware of. Like, because maps hold distinctions. Like, I mean, I could be offered one map that says, like, from Western modern culture, that I am basically a physical body, or my body. That's one way to look at it, is that I have a physical body, and then I have a mind. But that's, there's anyway. I'm given certain maps from modern culture and taught in school those maps, but it changes a whole lot if I get a new map that says, oh, I have an emotional body too.
Mm-hmm.
I have an emotional body that has feelings, and that those feelings can actually be useful. Like, it's not just that changes my experience of reality, and I might not have even known that I wanted anything relating to that, and it might not even first, when I see the map, be clear to me that I want that. Part of me may be really clear. I don't want emotions. They're complicated. They're messy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also about, like, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get too complicated right now either, though.
Yeah. Well, my question I posed to you earlier in the week, about maps, I'd be curious to explore a bit, because I know you carry a lot of maps that make distinctions that I haven't seen. And some of the work that I'm doing for curriculum I'm writing right now is sort of, I'm looking for a map around expanding the box. Box being like our current worldview, and I'm interested in how to get to a larger worldview. I'm interested in a path towards a more like world-centric or ecocentric or cosmocentric way of perceiving the world. And I have a sort of egocentric or human-centric or culture-centric way of seeing the world right now. So I'm interested in maps of like, how do I get from this place where I am, this camp of like egocentrism, anthropocentrism, like human-centeredness, to one that's more like earth-centered, that one that acknowledges the interconnectedness of all things. And that journey is what one I'm particularly interested in. So it's like, what's the map, I wonder, or do you have any, or maybe this is many multiple maps of like, how do I get my box of egocentric worldview to transform into a much larger box that's probably more circular, more spiral, or just a very complex knot box?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and as I was talking to you before, I'm curious about how we can build this map, or like I could offer some pre-constructed maps, and I'm curious from about kind of taking the long way around to create this together, or to explore from each of our experiences what this could look like.
So we should get our pencil crayons out and
Well, I think we can maybe that can be a later step. I propose that that could be a later step.
but metaphorically, if we had our pencil crayons and we were creating this map together, like what elements of this map would we need to draw down?
Well, before we even start with drawing, I just want to ask you a little bit more about where this is coming from for you, and if you could describe a little bit for the listeners and for me, really, like what is this curriculum building that you're doing, and what is this uh what how did you, Michael Jeffery, come to decide that you wanted to pursue I think it's a master's degree? And
Yeah,
what's that all about?
a lot of things. Which story I'll share today is maybe at the base, which is most linked to the question I just asked you, is just a deep grief and just a deep knowing and quest for purpose and making good use of this precious life that I have, this body I was born into at this time with all these other beings. It feels like a very precious opportunity. And the experience of that, I see there's a lot of I'm going to say the challenges of modernity that have touched me the most are around ecological destruction and a lot of social justice issues. And in my quest to kind of understand what's at the root of that and what I can do about that, I started more and more to understand that we all see the world through a particular lens. And through that lens, these colored glasses that we wear, it really affects all our actions and the decisions we make and how we interact with others. And just everything that we do in the world is filtered through this lens. And there's a particular lens that seems quite ubiquitous, at least in modern Western culture, that's very focused either on the individual or like the ones the individual is connected with and loves. So me and my family and my friends and my people. And there's good biological basis for doing this. But it's also a lens that doesn't see the non-human world as sentient or as valuable as humans. So humans are most important, and within the humans, my people are most important, and within my people, I'm most important. This is not true across the board, but this is a sort of pattern. And so I came to this idea, guidance from lots of reading and teaching and deep self-work, that replacing that lens with one that understands and sees my interconnectedness with all beings, that understands myself as just one node in a giant web of equally important beings with equal value, who all are essential to make the whole, is a different lens, which, you know, exists in most indigenous cultures all over the planet, which is a lens that the actions that evokes, as opposed to more self-centered actions or more collective serving actions. And that is a sort of antidote to ortonic or like heal adaptation to like many of the issues of modernity. So my work centers around how do we transform the lens through which we see the world to one that is more holistic, more in service to the collective, that sees the bigger picture, that is more wise. So I guess that's a long way in to kind of speak what I'm saying too, but I'm really interested in changing the lenses that we see the world through.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in how that affects our actions, and recognize that all our actions are based on that lens through which we see the world.
Yeah. Thank you. I noticed that one of the important points that I feel fear to like miss this point is that the maps that I can offer, which I think are most helpful and potentially transformative, like they become useful when they are experienced and not just intellectually understood, you know? So, and that experiential dimension of changing who I am from the inside out is, I mean, that is the way that change happens. Change happens experientially. It doesn't happen by it's like I can intellectually understand new information, but there's a part of me that if I'm not willing to transform, it's just gonna bat that new stuff away. So I've got each human has these defensive mechanisms, and in culture, if there's a lot of humans who have very similar defensive mechanisms, and those defensive mechanisms rule their life, and that's kind of the majority, then that will really emerge in culture as kind of a collective opinion, you know, and the opposite of that opinion will be kind of a taboo of culture. It won't emerge so easily into conversation, into public conversation. And for me, yeah, to really shift is to really internalize something deeply, so it affects me emotionally, energetically, intellectually, and you know, in all my bodies and across my whole self. And I would say too that there's a lot of social justice action being taken right now because a lot of people see the pain of the egocentric me style of living, and the havoc that's wreaking on the planet. And so there's an impulse to like take signs and protests sort of the larger whole. But I mean, my fear is that that's not very effective, because it really, like, change only really happens at an individual level. It happens one individual at a time. So that's one aspect that I would put on this map, is that change has to be experiential, and it includes discomfort.
Mhm.
Like, because identity, which is another word for box, that's a jargonish word from this that I use in my culture, called possibility management. Another word for it is identity or ego, and that is the ego or the identity. It has its defensive mechanisms, and when I, as a human, am identified with these mechanisms, then if something comes in that violates, the taboos that I have built within my identity, then those defensive mechanisms will kick into gear, and they will try and fight that thing away. And so a question for me is, how can I begin to experiment in new ways where I can notice that the defensive mechanisms are happening and discern between the things that are truly actually life threatening, like where they might require me to fight back, like a cougar is actually trying to attack me or something like that, and something that seems scary but is actually just it's just my defensive mechanisms. Which, like, it could be anything. It could be I start to feel sadness, but then I feel fear about what other people will think of me, so I fight the sadness back. Because last time I cried, I was ridiculed when I was 6 or something like that. But the emerging feelings, there are parts in each of us that are like these feeling parts and subtle energetic parts, these that can connect us to nature, connect us to other people in ways that are expansive and transformative. And like those are some of the most important impulses to begin letting in. And it can feel really scary. It can feel like dying. And that's the one way to describe what the process of expanding the box or expanding the identity or transformational initiatory work is.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Really, what that's evoking for me is just like one really important map is just an understanding of the nervous system too. Like I hear a lot of like needing to acknowledge like what vessels we're working with to start here. Like I think a lot of that discomfort you meant is like a sort of rewiring of the nervous system from traumatic holding patterns. Like trauma being not the thing that happened that was really painful and harmful to our system in the past, but the patterns that we still carry from that traumatic event. Things, and so like these holding patterns kept us safe when we were told not to cry by our father when we were 6 years old. The pattern was, I'm gonna fight tears. So the trauma is this like resistance to feeling. And I just seeing how, understanding how the biological and psychological functions of the bodies that we carry that do transform through this work is really useful. So just noticing, I'm grateful for all the people who have been working to create intelligence and maps about how we can transform on these levels so far.
And I want to add that part of what being centered to me means is really being in my own authority and my experience, and being clear what discomfort is healthy and what discomfort is unhealthy. So like it makes a big difference if I can discern like, oh, is that pain in my stomach uh, a kidney stone, or like a ruptured whatever, like is this a physical sensation that requires medical attention, or is this a feeling? And mm, and it's important to like if I have an intuition, or I have a sense that this is a ruptured appendix or something, and somebody else is like, dude, you're just feeling, it's just, you'll get over it, or well, this is where it's helpful to be in my own authority and to be clear, this is what this is. And it's not, and that might sound like a really obvious example, people, people are so, modern culture does not train us to really be in our bodies and to really notice these things, and to so just the importance of being connected to yourself. Even if somebody comes around and they say that they're a guru or something like that, it's like they're not inside of you. It's like it's important to have boundaries, even with people who are very, very evolved, or people who say that they're very evolved. A lot of,
especially.
there's a lot of charlatans out there. Yeah. But I mean, there's so many. I could go back on the opposite side and say, like, at the same time, community, team, intimacy, these are so valuable. So, I mean, there's a part of my identity, which I don't know how exactly it got constructed, but there's a part of me that's like really scared of being taken advantage of, being manipulated, being controlled. And so when my defenses get threatened, I can react and kind of try and set up, can fight away the thing that I see might be trying to control me. And one of the ways that I do that is to self-isolate. And so I'm in that journey right now of discerning, like, yeah, to what extent is this real, that there are actually some people who would want to take advantage of me, or lead me astray from my own insight or intuition. And to what extent is it like, no, I'm actually just scared of intimacy. And it's not so simple all the time. So I would just offer to everyone to just like, yeah, sometimes what your heart and your being really, really wants is the thing that your defenses will be most scared of. And at some level, it will just taking the risk of going for it, I'm reminded of a friend who told me that when they first started sitting in sharing circles, they went to like 20, 30 sharing circles where they just didn't say anything during the whole thing. And they just listened and just passed the feather as it got to them and went around. And then, but they were on this inner journey, and like nobody was forcing, there's no expectation to share at all. And then came to be their time to share. And it was really profound for them, because they had always, my interpretation of it was like they'd been pressured to speak by so many people in their lives, so to actually have a space where there was no expectation whatsoever. They could come really when they're ready. So that's another aspect to identity change, transformation, box expansion that is important, is that like sometimes pressure from the outside is really helpful, and sometimes it's the absence of pressure. It's just like sanctuary, and each person has differences in that way.
Mhm.
And so I want with you and your request, Michael, to like, I want to give you something that really will work for you, like this curriculum thing. But I want it to be able to jump off of the page.
Mm.
Like, I don't want it to be just something that if somebody's like reading this curriculum, I don't know what the deal, how you're presenting it, but like, I want to support you to have it in a way that is actionable and experiential and how is it so far? Like, like is any of this that we're exploring kind of fulfilling a need or
Yeah, it feels good, meta conversation around it. For this curriculum, I'm particularly interested in the like a deeper, true theoretical map that holds all the embodied practices I do, because the curriculum is rich with embodied practice, embodied integrative practice. And this is emergent. It's like the theory that holds them all might not emerge till afterwards. But it's rich to come from the set right now. I'm also aware that our time is getting very near the end. Is there anything else we need to say before we sign off?
feel some fear and some sadness to be ending?
Mm-hmm.
uh, how can is this curriculum that you're building something that people will be able to participate in, and if so, how would people who are listening eventually find out about that?
Well, we'll get there. It'll turn into a e-course, and I'll also be facilitating in Nelson, but it's also a standalone thing for transformational educators, or retreat leaders to support with the backend integration of the transformational events and offerings that they create. So this seems to be where a big gap in transformational work is in our culture. Like there's many really powerful, well-run retreats and plant medicine ceremonies and the vision quest rituals, and there's a lot of really great transformational offerings out there. But a common theme is that on the back end of those, it's hard to weave often the powerful numinous experiences that happen on these retreats and experiences back into one's daily life. So the curriculum is based around what sort of enactments and embodied practices and tools can people use to integrate profound experiences back into their everyday, day-to-day life, so that the effects are way more integrated and whole and transformational in the big picture, not just for a weekend or a week or a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I hope you continue sharing more about the details as they emerge on these calls. And yeah, I guess we'll sign off, and I'll just say again, everyone, please reach out to us if this is touching. If you happen to be listening, it's I feel really glad to be just releasing them into the unknown. And if you happen to be listening, then let us know. Give us your feedback, your questions, and you can also getting to the point where we're gonna have to start paying to host these on the podcast platform, the audio versions. So if you are able to donate money, it's paypal.me/bridges to next culture, I think is the link, and it'll be in the description below. And maybe even eventually we'll set up a real Patreon. So thanks for listening. Anything else, Michael?
No, that's it. Thanks, Scott.
Okay, thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.